everybody. Today we are going to discuss one of the very important aspects of managing human resources in the organization. And you see, the basic unit of organization is the human being. You may be technologically very advanced, but still you need the human being to operate and deliver whatever is the desirable outcome and enhance the profitability. So, human resource is one of the most significant areas in which you need to focus, and if you want people to perform effectively, then it is very important that one understands the significance of behavior of the members of the organization while they are an active participant in the process. Now, for this we need to first understand the basic thing is that the human resource, how do we understand the human aspect? It is not the resource, it is the human aspect that we need to focus on. And the getting together the needs of the organization and the needs of the people who work in the organization, they have to be brought together, and for this we need to identify and create that kind of environment whereby the needs of the organization and the needs of the human being, the employees mainly, they come to a point where both are effectively existing with each other. So, for this, one of the most suitable intervention is counseling. Let me just explain what is counseling per se. We will be going into details later on, but let me tell you, because there is a lot of misunderstanding about counseling. We take it as if some mad person only needs counseling. It is not so. Everybody, even in a normal circumstance, to understand one's own well-being and extend that well-being to the organizational functioning, counseling is required. So, it is very important that this process of counseling be made an important aspect, or you can say a compulsory aspect of any organizational setup without having any kind of negative orientation about counseling per se. Now, there are certain issues and problems about understanding the counseling process per se, because if you want to maintain the structure, the relationship, the communication, the work pressure, the role ambiguities, if you want to understand all these aspects, we need to understand the need for counseling. So, first we talked about the organizational processes which are important for effective functioning of the individual as well as the organization, but one has to also remember that we are not segregating the individual human being as an employee from his or her own personal life. So, a need comes where we need to understand the personal issues. One should not say that these are not a part of organization. It is not that. The need of the individual, his or her relationship with others at family level, at organization level, at life events, changes. Let me stop here, let me tell you one thing. Suppose a person gets married, man or woman. Now there is a change. The organization has to synchronize with those changes. So there has to be a symbiosis and understanding of the changed circumstances of the person, because it affects his or her functioning vis-a-vis the organization. Now, how do we know that there is some need for counseling? What are the symptoms? One of the major symptoms is the person being irritable, being aggressive, and we take it that this is his habit. No, this is not a person's habit. That person may be quite genial, congenial, happy at home, but why did that person become irritable and aggressive at the organizational context? This is one of the symptoms. Then the number of increases in accidents. We are all familiar with the industrial accidents or organizational accidents. It may be due to machine, but major factor is not the machine per se, it is the human being. Then people getting fatigued, stressed out, suffering from burnout. They need counseling, and organization has to create that kind of space. Then there is another very, very important aspect, that is the substance abuse. People, in order to run away, avoid the stress that they suffer from their work, they go into an escape route through a very wrong route, that is the substance abuse. We don't call it even substance use, we call it abuse. And all this is human aspects. The resultant will be a decrease in productivity. People start wondering that this person was so happy and so productive, what has happened? That he or she is not able to perform or is not performing as expected or at a higher level. Then another issue is a new person coming to the workplace. Don't think that this person will automatically adjust to the workplace. He needs to be counseled. He needs to be advised. Counseling is just not plain advice. It is a process where one is, like to introduce the change, because workplace may be a new place. It's not enough to give an orientation training. Actual place of work is very different, because in orientation there is a lot of support system. You have friends, you have your mentor, your teacher, but when you are in actual space of work, then things are different. So adjusting to the workplace is a very major thing. If it is not done in the initial stage, it is going to result into an ineffective worker or person leaving. The turnabouts are very, very fast. People leave, turnouts become very frequent. So this is another difficulty. And the difficulty in maintaining relationship with one's own self and also with others. All these are required for the counseling to be instituted as an organizational process. Now, what is counseling? I can't go into such a vast subject in this brief time, but I am trying to focus on the main ideas which will be useful to you. See, in counseling, there is give and take of ideas, feelings between the two persons, the individual who is seeking counsel and the counselor. So, there is an individual interaction regarding issues and problems, but it is not only at the individual level, there may be a group counseling, people having similar problems coming from similar background. There you can do or you can institute group counseling, and it mainly involves helping individual to deal or cope better with the problems one is facing. So, it is not just the problem resolution per se, but you need to look at or hope for some change which is more or less stable. I am not saying permanent, but stable while the person is in his or her job. So, there are two individuals, one we call as the client who is being counseled and the counselor who is doing the counseling. So, counseling is not done by anybody or everybody. It is a professional approach towards the client, and it is not a very simple process as we take it. Like for example, giving an advice is not counseling, we call it counseling, or the interaction between two friends in resolving some certain crisis. It is not counseling, it is advice giving. One has to have a professional setting and one has to have some kind of orientation and training. You have to have a training to be a counselor, and counseling thus becomes a very important aspect of organizational functioning. So, to summarize, counseling initiated and maintained in order to facilitate the most important thing, the behavioral change in the client. Behavioral change may be at the personal level, at the workspace, or at the social level. People who are not able to adjust to their workmates, that is where the counseling is required, because that may create some kind of irritation for others and disappointment for the person. So, in order to avoid, we need to facilitate the behavioral change, and that is in a very simplistic way of summing up the counseling as a process. Now, what are the key points? As I said earlier also, it is a professional interaction between two individuals. The other thing is, and very important, it involves helping individuals. Counseling is a helping profession. Helping is just not one shot affair, it is a continued affair which goes on for a long period of time. And this helping may be on the basis of problems, issues, making decisions, and come to a kind of a solution. The professional nature of counseling is done in formal and serious setting, and we have to, at this point, I would like to emphasize that counseling is just not one-way process where you just think that you are the giver and the person who is receiving the counseling is the receiver. It is not so. It is not so easy. You have to uphold the rights and well-being, that is very important, of the individual who is seeking counseling or who has been advised to go to the counselor. So, the rights of the human being, human rights and the welfare of the human being, the counselee. not the counselor only. And main thing is behavioral change, especially this is relevant for organizational context. We want effective, efficient workers. So, what kind of changes are required? So, the needs of the organization has to be understood by the counselor, and then he or she can go into that process where one focuses on those kinds of behavioral changes, keeping in mind the rights and well-being of the individual who is being counseled. Now, this is a very general thing about counseling, the functions of counseling. Here, one thing I would like to emphasize time and again is the unconditional positive regard for each other. There is no condition. Even if the counselor is being paid, it doesn't make any difference. One has to hold for each other, the counselee as well as the counselor, the unconditional positive regard, empathy, to be able to think in the way the person who is seeking the counseling is undergoing, to be able to put oneself in other person's shoes, and congruence. That is very important, because here one has to have a mindset which is in tune with the mindset of the counselee who is being counseled. And other very important thing is that continuous reassurance to the individual, so that the individual is able to face the problems, issues one is undergoing, one is experiencing. Thus, what happens that in this process, one is promoting the rational and clear thinking to do away with the usual irrational thoughts we may develop from time to time, and convert it into rational thinking. Rational not for every circumstance, but if it is in the organizational context, so what is the organizational rationality, that has to be brought in by the counselor. So, we have to aim for behavioral change and helping the individual in this process to release the emotional tension which may be causing stress, anxiety, and some kind of malfunctioning of the person. Now, let us come in brief about the kinds of counseling, the types of counseling one undergoes. The first one to start is the individual counseling, where the individual, one particular individual is helped through verbal and non-verbal behavior. The counselor has to understand the verbal as well as the non-verbal behavior of the person seeking counseling and help the person to promote better understanding that are being faced by the person, the issues and the problems. The other type is group counseling. Suppose at the time of recruiting, we get people from one kind of background, either it can be institutional or it can be ethnic. Now, or the other is that the persons are facing similar problem. These people can be brought together and counseled. This is group counseling. The advantage of this is that less time is consumed, and what I find is the most important thing is that the participants who are in the group have a chance to interact with each other and learn about each other's problem. So, they develop the understanding that they are not the unique people facing the problem, but here the issues are the confidentiality and the privacy is lost to some extent, which is present in the person to person individual counseling. Then we have one type which is known as the directive counseling, where the counselor takes the main role and where the counselor is also listening, not only guiding, motivating the individual, but listening to the problems of the individual. One thing one needs to understand that in the directive counseling, the onus mainly lies with the counselor, and it can be used with people who have external locus of control, which means it is a psychological term, which means that the person is dependent on extraneous information, and since he or she is dependent on others giving the information or other sources apart from one's own self, is more indecisive, and they find it difficult to open up with the counselor. So, the job of the counselor is to help the individual open up, not depend on extraneous information or issues, but something that is within one's own self. So, this is the directive in briefest nutshell, and this can also be used, the directive counseling can also be used to effectively reassure the employee of the problem solving capacity of one's own, emotional release, because here this acts as a catharsis, and the counselor helps in bringing some clarity in the thought process of the employee. So, this is a very effective way, one of the most effective counseling, but it cannot be used with all. So, one has to know whether the person is dependent on others or is able to think on his own. There is this non-directive counseling, where the employees in the organization or individuals takes the lead, and the counselor mainly plays a role of creating a conducive environment. Then we have the participative counseling, where both participate, it is a midway, and the exchange of ideas are by the counselor as well as the counselee, and listening skills of both the counselor as well as the counselee plays a very active role in helping the person change. And thank you very much.